Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We are picking up with the Ramban. We began the Ramban yesterday. The Ramban is on chapter 46, verse 15, Parak Mem Vav, Pasuk Tes Vav. And if you remember, there was a technical problem, seemingly a problem, in the Psukim that it says in the Pasuk that the descendants of Leah, the progeny of Leah, were 33. And if you count the names, it was 32. So Rashi had brought down the idea of the Gemara that actually Yocheved, the mother of Moshe, was born upon entry into Egypt. And there are different psukim besides this issue that seem to reinforce that. But the Ibn Ezra asks an extremely basic question. The Ibn Ezra says, wow, that's pretty impressive. That means that Yocheved was 130 years old when Moshe was born. And you would think the Torah would have told me that, because that's pretty nifty. And the Torah makes a big deal about the fact that Sarah was 90 when Yitzchak was born, and this is even more impressive. So the Ramban is now responding to the Ibn Ezra. And the first basic point, which we're not going to see in detail, but the first basic point that we saw with the Ramban was basically, he says, look, Yocheved is the daughter of Levi. That's what it says in the Psukim. So there's only 3 generations to get from Levi being an adult, presumably somewhat of an aged adult, by the time he got into, or at least an adult, by the time they got into Egypt. And he has a daughter named Yocheved, and he has a son named, and he has a grandson named Moshe. And Moshe is going to be 80 years old, 210 years after they enter Egypt. The Ramban says, how would you like to slice that? What would you like? Would you like it to be that Yocheved was born 50 years after they came into Egypt? Okay, maybe. First of all, Levi's going to be pretty old when Yocheved's born. Then Levi's wife is going to be pretty old when Yocheved's born. Okay, but maybe. But then I just want to point out that means Yocheved is 80 when Moshe is born. So what do you want? Do you want Yocheved to be 30 when Moshe is born? Okay, so that means that Levi is 100 years older than you have him now from when he had a child. Like the Ramban says, look, it's complicated. There's 3 generations, and we have to get from one point to. So that's sort of a technical response to the Ibn Ezra. But now the Ramban says something that's frequently quoted, and it's a fascinating philosophical point to reflect on. It's hard to tell you where we are in the Ramban. How about that for a promising introduction? It's about, I would say, 25 lines or so into the Ramban. In my layout, it's a new paragraph. I don't know if that's in your layout. I can already tell you it's not a new paragraph in Sefaria, because I was desperately trying to find it in Shir earlier this week, and I had a hard time. And I gave up. So how about that for promising? But about 25 lines or so into the Ramban, Avol Omar Lach Davar. Avol Omar Lach Davar, Shu Emes Ubarer Batorah. I want to tell you something which is true and clear in the Torah. Ki hanisim hanasim al pinavi sheyisnabe kain mitchila. Miracles that were prophesied ahead of time. Oh, b'malach nigla b'malachus Hashem, or brought about by an angel who is sent by God and revealed as such. Such miracles, yazkirem hakasav. Such miracles are specifically and clearly noted in the Psukim. Va'anasim me'elehan, and miracles that happen on their own. Sorry, that was not a good translation. And miracles that happen in a less dramatic way in terms of not being announced or anything, but miracles that just occur. Lazor tzadik, olahachvis rasha, to help a righteous person or to do in a wicked person. Lo yuzkuru batoro banvim. It doesn't get mentioned explicitly. And that's an amazing thing that the Ramban is saying. So just to process this for a second, the angel comes to Abraham and Sarah, and he says, I, as God's messenger, am going to bring you a baby a year from now. So he called his shot, and it was not only informing, but to the extent that it's informing, so this means that it's the type of miracle that God wants it to be known that it's coming. And presumably when it comes, God wants it to be clear that this miracle occurred. And that's why it was announced in the first place. Those types of miracles are specifically noted in the Torah. But miracles to get from point A to point B are a different story. And just to say it differently, miracles to get from point A to point B are vital in God's conduct of the world, and they abound. And of course, it depends how you define miracle. You could define miracle as divine intervention, which we believe happens many times, for the good or bad of it, or for the perceived good or bad of it. I think it's fair to say that in this current situation we currently have in Israel, I think it's fair to say that there's been divine intervention in a lot of ways in this story. We want it to be only for brachos. But so much of the story is boggling on both ends of it. And what the Ramban is saying is that there are all kinds of events that God helps with. And we know throughout Jewish history, there are so many moments that we look at and we say, wow, how could this have been? Why would this have been? And we're compelled to believe that it's looking at it just from the statistical level or just from what normally occurs. It's very hard to understand. Is it a supernatural miracle? Generally not. But is it remarkable? Yes. And the Ramban says those miracles happen all the time. And that doesn't get specifically noted in the Torah. Skipping a line or two, V'lama yizkirim ha'kasav, v'cho yesodas ha'Torah, b'nisim nistarim haim. All of the foundations of the Torah have to do with the hidden hand of God. V'am ha'Torah, ein b'chol inyano rak nisim. We, the nation of the Torah, everything having to do with us is divine intervention. Lo teva minhag. You think if it was just regular statistics, you think Klal Yisrael would still be around today? Certainly not. What are the odds? It's not just nature. It's not just the way of the world. It's the way of God's world. By the way, the Ramban says we talk about people getting rewards and punishments. What does that mean? What does that mean when a person gets a reward? We talk about an idea that a person can. The Torah talks about extensively that Klal Yisrael can have blessings, and Klal Yisrael can have difficulties because of how we conduct ourselves. How is that going to happen? Rosh Hashanah, we talk so much, God give us this, God give us that, don't do this to us, don't do that to us. Aren't all those things that we believe in the hand of God? So the Ramban says, so every time the hand of God shows up, there has to be a drum roll, and there has to be a pasuk in the Torah that says, this is what happened now. This is what the Torah is all about. Okay. Okay, I think we could go, maybe we'll skip about 15 more lines to Kvar Perashti, and I've already explained to you, you know, he says actually the Ebenezer is misunderstanding the miracle of Avram and Sarah having the child that they had when they had him. Ki Avram holiness Yitzchak, Teramoso, Shivim v'chamei shana. You know, Avram was old. Certainly by our standards, Avram was old when Yitzchak was born. Avram lived another 75 years after Yitzchak was born. So let's just, in other words, Avram hadn't even lived 2/3 of his life when Yitzchak was born. So he gets into the fact that, you know, basically, if you're talking about the miraculous nature of something happening in someone's lifetime, you probably are better served thinking about it as to how far it is in their life than how old they are. That's an interesting observation. Look at the psukim, says the Ramban. Avram had children 40 years after Yitzchak was born. So, and then Ramban says, and by the way, and if you say, well, of course Avram had a child 40 years after Yitzchak was born, because God made him young again. Says the Ramban, didn't say in the psukim that God made him young again. Didn't say that. So now let's also ask, so why didn't it say in the psukim that God made him young again? Why we can ask that question too? Mehem sholidu b'sknasamad v'lo shivim shanu shmonim shanu v'yoser v'yiskom b'malachus l'vitivam. Ramban says it could happen that somebody could, give birth. Again, we wouldn't say at our times 90 or 100 years old, but he says, Avram lived much longer than we live today. And so the point seems to be the fact that after so many years, Avram and Sarah had a child. That seems to be the point. And because the angel announced it ahead of time, then the nature of that miracle is a miracle that's supposed to be noted as clearly the hand of God. Of course, we can relate to it specifically on the mission that Avram and Sarah had together in life. They were so much about bringing monotheism and belief in monotheism to the world, how significant it was that these people who were clearly God's people had this miraculous child brought to them. So it makes sense that it's noted in the Torah. Yocheved, bearing Moshe 130, had to be. It wasn't a miracle to make a point. It was a miracle to accomplish what needed to be accomplished. And I think this is worth thinking about for a few moments, what the Ramban is saying with that. So what the Ramban is saying is, first of all, Yocheved had to be the one who would be Moshe's mother. Statement number one. And that was vital. And Yocheved could only be who Yocheved was if Yocheved was raised by Levi and his wife. And also vital. And statement number three, Moshe Rabbeinu had to be the stage in life that he was when he led the Jews out of Egypt for him to be able to accomplish what he was able to accomplish. And by the way, he had to be able to live long enough to be who he needed to be in the desert as well. So when you put together all these things, it just had to be that Yocheved would be 130 when Moshe was born. That's it. And I do just want to note, because I don't think there's I think the examples abound in the Torah, but whenever I'm with women's groups and I say something like this, they all say, why doesn't anyone ever talk about this stuff? So now I'm going to talk about this for a moment. There's clearly a greater emphasis on Yocheved, the mother of Moshe, had to be born in Levi's house. There's a greater emphasis on that than Amram, the father of Moshe, having to be born at Levi's house, because Amram wasn't born in Levi's house. Amram was a grandson of Levi. Yocheved, according to this, was a daughter of Levi. And what this speaks to is the unique and tremendous impact. Of course, both parents are very, very important, but particularly the mother. And the mother has such a unique impact on who a person is. I just want to see. Yeah, I think this is a good place to stop. I do have to apologize. I have to run today, so I don't have time to take comments. Sorry to spend so much time on one topic, but this is a very famous Ramban. Want to wish everyone a good day. Take care, everybody.